Thank you, and good evening. I do love speaking at 9:30 at night. It's my bedtime, you know, really. Anyway, we're here to talk about DB7, but also I'd like to take the opportunity to talk about other cars I was involved with, two of which you've probably never seen before, never really saw the light of day, but they do have a nice story behind them. And also some of the, what's that do? Well, that's that thing. Okay, all right, thank you. But first of all, let's talk about DB7. These, incidentally, were sketches that I did for Bob Dover for, I think it was for his leaving do. So Bob has the original ones. Maybe it's his birthday, I can't remember, but he's the original. But we'll try and do something with some future date, we'll see. Just to show that I can still draw accidents. They were a while ago. So there I am, 30 odd years ago, in the rain. This was taken because the Aston Martin people didn't actually have a picture of me with the DB7 in any of the archives. And they decided to bring me around to Block 7 to get a picture of me. It was pouring with rain, but I still had to have the picture. They paid for the photographer, so it had to be taken. So you can see there I am, losing all my hair, getting wet. But a lot was happening. To lead up to the DB7 is quite a long, extraordinary story. I'll try and make it as short as possible. I arrived at TWR, Tom Walkinshaw Racing. He wanted a new studio. He realised having a design studio would be the window, the shop window to his business. He was absolutely right. He realised the design style could sell product. And so he brought me in from Ford. Peter Stevens was going to take the job, but he went off to McLaren to design something called the F1, whatever that was. And I got the job of TWR Design, we built it up, and he promised me all sorts of things, which a lot of people said, yeah, whatever, we'll see. And we started doing some fairly ordinary stuff like body kits and tractors and body kits. And tractors were quite interesting, actually. I quite enjoyed Track Marshall, do you remember that? Track Marshall, it didn't last very long, but we did some stuff for them. Anyway, he also was interested in Aston Martin. Tom wanted a car company to his own. This is the fact of it, really. Not people would know that. And he had his eyes on various companies, but Aston really was the one that he wanted to own. And he realised that Ford didn't have much interest in Aston. And they didn't really know what to do with it. They were building 30, 40, 50 cars a year. I think it was a big advantage at the time. It wasn't making any money. It was labour intensive. He saw an opportunity. So he went to Aston. I think he spoke to Mr. Gauntlet about a few things. We actually came back with some ideas. I designed an Aston based on a Ford Thunderbird that Tom thought was a good idea. It wasn't. It really wasn't. Then he had another brain scheme that said, well, we'll take the Ford Granada estate, it's very gentrified, it's a bright car, and we've got an Aston front end on the Ford Granada estate car. It's a little bit like putting the front end on Toyota, but then we won't go there. It wasn't a really good idea either, so he kept kind of walking in and out of Aston to see if he could actually pick up a bit of business from them, because they didn't really have their own R&D centre. And also Aston at the same time were working on the idea of a small car, an affordable car that would be smaller and more affordable and more effective, more efficient than the Vantage, which really was a fairly large piece of machinery that cost a lot of money to make. We discovered, by the way, when we actually did a cost analysis on the engine of that car, the cost of the car, the piece cost, the material cost, and maybe the build as well, was over £17,500. The Ford could build a car for about £7,000, so that tells you roughly where the scope of the opportunity was to get some cost out of the company. And so he worked closely with Aston, and then it kind of went quiet for a while. And in the meantime, he'd asked me to do a car for Jaguar. Now, he also saw opportunity, as he does. There was a car called XJ41. It was a Jaguar-based new platform, all-wheel drive, straight six engine in the front. It became a very big car, and it was a sports 2+2 sports car to replace the XGS. And through the years of developing this car, grew and grew and grew. And Bill Hayden, I don't know if you ever heard of Bill Hayden, he was a rather formidable chap from Ford, walked into Jaguar one day when they bought the company and said, you're going to stop that project. Broke everybody's heart. He told them to scrap the cars. I think two still exist, actually. And so Jaguar was left without the successor to XGS. And really the car wasn't that great a car. It was overweight, it was oversized, and it was definitely overcost by a huge amount. So Tom went in and said, look, I've got an XGS platform. I know how to race them. I know how to develop them. I'll put a sort of sports car on that body, on that platform for you. You don't have to pay for a new platform. It's there for the taking. I'll make it work. All right, have a look. And Tom in those days owned Jaguar Sport. In the end, he owned 51%. Smart move. And Jaguar owned 49%. And so Tom decided what to do with Jaguar Sport, and this was on the project he suggested. And he actually funded the first part of it himself. And so he came to me and he said, look, I want to get the feeling of this Jaguar, this XJ41, onto the XJ platform. What do we have to do? I said, well, you have to change the whole visual architecture. You have to move the screen forward, you have to take length off the tail, and so on and so forth. And I took him through the various issues of proportion. Any car designer will tell you the first thing in any car design is about proportion and stance, and we had to change it on the XJS to get the right design for whatever car it might be, in modern sports car. And so we set about on this, and we got some good engineering done. We moved the cowl forward, we took a lot of length off the tail, restructured the back of the car, and so it went on as this Jaguar, potential Jaguar. And the guys at Jag were okay about it, they weren't quite sure. I had visitors in the design studio. We're trying to put a clay model together. No, it's got to be this way, it's got to be that way. And if any of you have been working for other companies, you know how painful it would be if you're a creative working for somebody else's creation. It's quite hard work, but I bit my tongue and we got on with it. And this is quite a painful process because Tom really started to realise that Jaguar didn't want this car. They didn't feel the XJS platform was going to be good enough, although he felt it should be and could be because he raced them. He won the championship in them. And so we moved forward with this car a little bit in a bit of a vacuum. And then one day Walter Hayes walked in with Tom. And I knew Walter from days of old. I'd never met him, but I knew who he was. And a fantastic man he turned out to be. He came in puffing his pipe. And they said to me, so Harry, this is quite interesting what you're doing here. And this was really an unmade car. There was nothing there to be seen other than just the basic blocked proportions of a sports car. He said, you think you make an accident out of this? I said, oh yes, please, absolutely. And really that was the start of the conversation between myself and Walter, and clearly he'd been talking to Tom, and Tom had sold him the idea of building an affordable asset of the XJS platform, which is what we did, what we started. And of course, what Walter saw this as was effectively a replacement to, wrong way. He handed it to me, but he didn't give me the instructions. Replacement, in fact, for the DBs. I've got the DB7 up there, because really it's the most beautiful of them all, really. A gorgeous car, made famous, of course, by that Bond character. But it was a beautiful car, and this was a car really we were kind of looking towards to replace. The reality was it really replacing the DB6, which wasn't such a beautiful car. I'm sorry that you've got one. It's a beautiful car, but not as beautiful as the DB5 and DB4. And it's a shame what physics do to cars sometimes, isn't it? What aerodynamics can do to cars. They can really spoil the beauty of purity. And the DB7's got a bit of that compromise in terms of not allowing the aero to spoil it. But certainly this was a car, in our own minds, we were replacing an affordable Aston. Walter also, in his sort of coaching to me, I got quite a lot of coaching from Walter, and it was always in good spirit and well-intended. And anyone who knew him, he was always great company. But he loved this prototype Aston. You probably recognise one of two prototypes built. And I can't remember the name, you probably don't remember the name of it, but it was, I think one of them sold fairly recently for an extortionate amount of money. But this is a car he really liked, and he loved the voluptuousness of it and the roundness of it, and he kept showing me pictures of this, and how he felt he wanted some of this car to evolve into the new car, which is by this time called the NP New Compatible XX, NP XX, that was the code name for the car. I showed him some drawings of what we're up to. This is one of my early sketches. This is the only sketch I actually have left. I gave all the others away. Didn't I, Richard?
Yes. Thank you.
I'm always giving away my sketches. I've got a drawer in the office which is full of other people's sketches except mine for some reason. So don't ask me for a sketch, you're not going to get one. But I still have this one, and this is one of the early sketches for the DB7 to try and capture the car that we wanted. Now, we started the clay model, we worked it up, and here's the real catch here. as we were working it up, the Jag guys still thought they were going to get a Jag out of this. But they weren't, because Tom and I knew it was going to be an Aston Martin. He was actually funding it at this time, in case anybody thinks there's some legal question here, but he was funding this time. But we had the guys come in, and we didn't show them the front end or anything, we just said this is the car. I got a lot of help from them to say this wasn't the right car for them. And the further we got into the plan of this car, the more advice I got from Jaguar. It was not a Jaguar, it was something else. And actually they were quite right, it was something else. But you know, and I, of all people, would never know what a Jaguar would be. There you go. And maybe they're right. Maybe they're right. So we continued with this, and it was the first car I designed. And that surprises a lot of people when I tell them that. I've been in Ford for about 11, 12 years. I've done this mainly steering wheels and wing mirrors. I'd worked in gear for a while working with my brother Murray, and we did a car together, but really he did most of the design work. I'd never really done a car before. I'd waited all this time for this moment to design a car, ever since I was probably about 5 years old. I didn't tell Tom that, mind you. But I knew this was going to be a make or break car for me personally. And if it was going to be a disaster, I would probably never work again. But if it was going to be successful, it might actually take me on to other projects. So it meant everything to me. It was going to be, for me, a hit record or nothing else. It had to be a number one. And I can't express the amount of intensity and effort that went in to get this car right. Every line, the headlamp, for instance, took me about 2 weeks to get right. And every time I came in the morning and looked at it, I thought it was wrong. And I'd go back and do it again until we had the shape. And in fact, I have to admit, you know, in terms of intensity of work, it's probably the most in-depth car I've personally ever done in terms of its shape and its graphics and everything else. So, personally means a lot to me for that reason. It really was a huge learning curve. For those of you who don't know, this is a clay model. We still do cars in clay models. We sculpt them in clay. Now, what was interesting with this car, of course, is we were basing it on a platform called the XJS. There's remnants of an XJS sitting in front, which we use for the interior. And don't worry about the XJS bit, because I'll get to that towards the end. But what, of course, we weren't working digitally by this time. We do a clay model, we digitize it, we go into a computer of sorts. They were about that size in these days, and not little things that we use nowadays. But it went back to the computer. But we had no digital information for the XJS. It was all hand-drawn. The whole car was drawn up. Nobody even had the original drawings left. And so we had to digitize the whole car to get our original drawings in place and start from there. So we really were the first people to digitize the Jaguar XJS and engineer it from there on up. Now, as we know, the platforms would eventually come off at a certain stage through the prototype form of the Jaguar line. We'd take them off the Jaguar line and we'd use them to build the prototypes. I can't remember if we ever used them as one piece coming off the Jaguar line. I think we probably still came off as a platform off the Jaguar line when we went to production. I'm pretty sure it did, in its modified form. And so the digitized information was crucial to us. And so then, of course, we build clay models and we sculpt the clay models by hand. And the guy that really got me through this, one of the others, a guy called Andrew Miles, who's one of the best clay modelers, probably the best clay modeler in the world. He's no longer working with me. I tried to get him into Jaguar with me, but he's gone off to make millions in Germany somewhere. So he's not a rich clay modeler, but he's still hands-on. He was a brilliant man, and he still is a brilliant man. We're still very good friends, but he really saw me through the project probably more than anybody else did. When we got the clay, when we had the clay done, we covered in this thing called Dyno. Actually, what we do now is we paint the cars in clay and they look like real cars, but we use this stuff called Dyno. I remember this is a fairly makeshift studio that I put together with Tom back in 1990, and this was happening probably about 1991, 92, but that's been 92, early 92. And you know, it was a basic studio. We didn't have the facilities a Ford Motor Company had come from, so we were really working in a very rudimentary way. This rear three-quarters of the car, I had an idea of how this should look, and I could not get it to work. and I agonised it. I lost sleep over it, and I was hugely aware of the fact that the world would be watching me in this car and what would come out the other end. And there were times I thought, this isn't going to happen, this is not going to work, I can't do this. You know, it's that sort of wall moment where you really have to push through any discipline to try and get out the other end. I can't express how difficult this was for me at this stage. So we sat looking at this clay model, it's absolutely true. And it was kind of sort of that, it was before then actually. It was fairly rough. The front end was right, the roof lines were right, we were meeting all the hard points. The feasibility was good. But I could not get this rear three quarter, and I knew in my own mind what I was trying to get, it wasn't working. So it got to about 6 o'clock one evening, I was feeling a bit low, and Andy came up, he saw that, it was strong, so Andy, I can't see what's happening here. And we needed to take a few days off. He went off to the local spar shop around the corner, it was a pretty rudimentary industrial estate for it, and he brought back a bottle of gin. And a big bottle of tonic. Actually, he bought 2 bottles of tonic, he was very optimistic. And I was sitting on the floor looking at this car, and he opened a packet of crisps. This is reality of the car world. And he said, have that. And he poured me what I call a domestic gin and tonic, which is usually 2 to 1, you know, 1 tonic, 2 gins. And he said, drink that. And we sat there and we looked at it. He says, what do you think? I said, look, I want that surface to create that surface. I said, why don't we try it this way and try that way? Anyway, in the morning we had fixed it. We didn't drink the whole bottle of gin. We had 2 or 3 glasses. I had 2 or 3 glasses. I don't think he had any. He was too conscientious for that. And in the morning we had changed the whole back end of this car, and it was working. And the rest of the team came in, and they were absolutely flabbergasted. We'd been there all night to fix it. So the rear three quarters of the Aston is probably the nicest part of the car. That's how it came about, over a bottle of gin. The other aspect, you'll see him here, the other aspect of the DB7 of course is we couldn't afford things like our own headlamps and tail lamps. The headlamps were fairly straightforward to make, were standard round lamps. High tech at the time, with a lens put over it. In fact, it really was one of the first modern cars to put lamps inside behind the lenses. If you think about it, nobody else was doing it, because the old 50s cars did it a lot, but then that idea disappeared and became one homogeneous piece of glass with bulbs inside. So we went back to the idea of putting lamps inside the lenses. And if you look now, every car does that, doesn't it, really? It's got the lamps inside a global lens. So that was the way we made the front was fairly straightforward. The tail lamps we couldn't afford. At the time, a tail lamp would cost at least £350,000 to £450,000 for a tail lamp. Now they're about £1.5 million, by the way, in case you wonder. So, and so we had to go to the parts bin. We had Mazda, we had Ford, we had Jaguar, and right through the whole car, we got scattering in parts bin. Unashamedly, we weren't able to afford to put anything other than other people's components in this car. The tail lamps, in case somebody's got DB7 and get charged a huge amount of money from Aston for a new one, they're actually off the Mazda 323F. You have to cut the corner off them, and take the frame off, and you can put the old Mazda ones back in. That's it, if you can find the Mazda 323F, of course. I think we were in production about 20 years ago. The other interesting thing about it was the door handles, the pull-up door handles, and they're chrome. And they're off the Mazda 323 estate wagon. Not a saloon car or hatchback, but a wagon. And the reason we chose those handles, because I wanted them as flush as possible. Walter wanted chrome door handles. He insisted on that. I said, no. No, he wanted chrome door handles. And the only chrome door handle in the whole of the Ford parts bin worldwide was from a Mazda estate car. So that's where the door handles came from. The front indicators. Now I wanted lots of plan view of this car because what I wanted to do is shrink the car vision as much as possible over the line. And because I had the opportunity to take metal off underneath where I could and wanted to, we took quite a lot of the corners because the XGS was quite square underneath. We modified a lot of the sheet metal. We got a lot of radius and corners that really did shrink the car, and that's why it's got this wonderful homogeneous look. It just goes on round and round forever. And that's really a philosophy I've always held on to since. Sadly, these lovely soft round shapes are terrible for aero, by the way. The best aero cars are square like a brick. This is rather unfortunate. I say the law of physics. It's a terrible thing. In fact, on this car, the rear end should have been another 2 inches higher. And if you look at the last version of it, of course, include the rear spoiler to that height to get the best aero. It's something I did not want to do at the time. And Tom said, well, don't do it then. So we didn't. But the aero is not brilliant. Who cares? Looks better. The front lamps, incidentally, were off the Mazda Miata MX-5 because they're the only ones I could find that had enough radius. And when you take a lamp off one car and put another, they have to be in exactly the same orientation. You can't move them around. You know, X, Y, Z have to be exactly the same place to be homologated. They've got an E number on them. They have to be the same. So quite a tricky set of components to deal with. And of course, we worked up the interior. This is an old XJS platform. I think it was an old race car, actually, funnily enough. And we started to build the interior up on this, knowing that if we could make it fit this platform, it would fit the car. I mean, it seemed a bit rudimentary, but it worked. Jaguar XJS dials, we regraphed them, of course. And a lot of people say I was all Ford parts. There's no Ford parts, and they're all Jaguar parts, actually. Except the vents are from a Ford Granada. Ford Scorpion, whatever it's called. The rotary control, the control for the door mirrors off of Ford. I think these are the only parts that came off of Ford. The door handles were off of Miata and MX-5 because we liked the look of them and they worked, and that's where they came from. So the car was full of these components that we found off the Ford parts shelf. And it was great, of course, because Ford had all these companies to choose from at that point, so we had quite a lot of choice. But we gave it a distinctive interior. I have to say, I didn't really want to put wood into it. I felt the modern sports car shouldn't have wood. Walter insisted. At the end of the day, it was his car, so I bowed to that and said we'll put wood in it. And I think by the time we created the amount of wood we had, I think he was perfectly happy with that. And we got just enough of it to keep it modern without becoming overly lavish, like the previous Astons. The Sensitive Advantage had a lot of wood in it, I believe. And so the interior evolved, the exterior evolved, and we ended up with the DB7. This is a final clay model. I'm sure there are lots of things I'm going to forget to tell you, but I'll try and remember them as I go through it. The vent at the side was a great piece of fun because this was a piece of artistry we could pick up and apply to this car with a huge amount of pride. Here I am actually putting an Aston vent onto an Aston. Imagine how that felt. I mean, I never dreamt of such things when I was growing up. You know, I thought I'd just end up designing steering wheels and door mirrors. But there you go, here I was designing a vent for an Aston Martin. And this was the first Aston Martin after the DB6 of this hill. By the way, we didn't know it was going to be called DB7. We had no idea. It didn't even occur to me, frankly. And we didn't discuss it. It was just going to be a new, more affordable Aston. The original car, there's a feature line that goes down the side of it with the rubber moulding on it. And that is there to hide a joint line, because the original car, the first prototype built, had a flip up front, which was encompassed the whole of the wings, or the fenders, whatever they call it, that front part where the vent is. They were actually part of the bonnet. The top of it didn't have a shut line. In fact, you see that model there, I don't think it's got one, so that whole bonnet lifted up in one piece, and that was the intention to do that. It proved to be very difficult in reality. And the other thing was the wheels are an interesting story. I created this design of wheels, and Tom said to me, he said he wanted flat wheels because he knew from experience they were better for aero. And I said, no, you don't want these big, heavy, lumpy big wheels, because you put them on the XJS race cars, these very flat disc wheels. But they weigh a ton. I mean, these alloy wheels don't weigh, but weigh a lot anyway, but these things really weigh a lot. So I said, okay, I'll come up with an idea. So we designed a wheel and put a hubcap on it, plastic hubcap, and that's what the car downstairs had. But I designed the wheel knowing that one day the hubcap would probably come off if I had anything to do with it. I mean, a lot of people today who actually like that hubcap, which is quite interesting. I never really liked it. It's more of a frisbee to me. We call it a frisbee. But it eventually did come off, and lo and behold, underneath was a perfectly designed wheel. Which Tom only found out a bit later. He said, yeah, that kind of me lad. Anyway, and of course we got to the final car. I think that's the car downstairs, actually. This is the first photo shoot we did of the car. The car that went to Geneva. Now there's another interesting thing. Now all this time, while we're developing this car, the anguish with Ford, TWR, Aston, Walter was really stirring around. You know, Walter and Tom wanted this car to happen. Tom wanted to own it himself, truth be known. He created a car company called Aston Martin Oxford Limited, where this car would be built, and he had a 51% share of that, or 50% share of that company. And it was his intention, because Ford wasn't the slightest interest in Aston Martin. The CFO used to call it the Austin Martin Car Company. It's true. And Tom thought, here's opportunity. Once I get this car off the ground, I can start to pull this into my empire and own Aston Martin, or even Austin Martin. And really, there was a lot of indifference towards the car. And here's the pull. Walter worked tirelessly in Detroit, going over there, selling the idea, saying we've got to build this. And actually I've jumped the gun a bit here. That prototype that we built, I don't have a picture of it with the flip up front. We got to a gateway called PA, Program Approval. That's a point where Ford Motor Company would actually have their cash to develop the car further. It was a crucial point in the program. It meant commitment. And I was looking at, you see I make this up as I go along, I was looking at this clay model. And Tom came in and he said, we're going to go to, he asked me what PA meant, and I said, how significant is it? And I remember vaguely from my 4 days what it meant. He said, so if we get through PA with a project, I said, not necessarily, but you're a big step. I said, right, we've got to impress them, haven't we? And I said, oh yeah, Tom, no impressed. He said, so what's about a clay model? What do you normally do? I said, we'll do a clay model, we'll do a clay model of the interior, and we'll present it and with the business case to the board of directors of Ford Motor Company, very high-powered bunch of guys. And he said, well, what's about a clay model? I said, well, you can do a fiberglass model and paint it up beautifully, see-through windows, it looks authentic, it's more flash, but you wouldn't normally have to. No, that's what we'll do. Because Tom was like that. He would always go the next step to get what he had to get to make it happen. And he was formidable that way, and I was great admiration for this intent that he had. I said, right, okay, so he's bouncing out of the studio, walking down the corridor. And I had this feeling in my mind, because I just knew him well enough. And he walked down the corridor, he got halfway down, and he stopped, and I thought, oh dear, here we go. And he looked around and he said, right, what's better than a fiberglass model? His eyes are glittering. And I said, well, build a real car. This is 3 months away. That's what we'll do. I swear we built a real car in 3 months. We took an XJS platform, we did what we did to it, we put an engine in it. It's a V12 at this time, by the way. It was one of his V12s he could sell back to Aston, of course. 48 valve V12, or maybe a 12 valve V12 at that point. And 48 valve later. And we built the car, we took measurements of the clay, we went to motor panels, I think, in Coventry, we built the car up. And we produced it with perspex, plexiglass windows, no real glass. And we built the car. And so we turned up 3 months later, a running car, and it's not this one because it's the first production one, the third prototype production. But it looked just like this. And we went to the Kensington or Knightsbridge showroom of Aston Martin. And Red Pauling was there. Alex Trotman was not there. He was the next leader to be. Red Pauling, certainly I remember that name. Red Pauling was one of the top men for. And all the big chiefs were in from Detroit. They obviously had a meeting in Dunton or somewhere, or Morley. There they were. And we had the interior bug. And Tom went through the business case, and they said, well, where's the car? Anyway, this lift came up out of the basement, and we drove the car into the showroom. And they'd never seen anything like this. And he got the money. Showman to the end. So that's really what kicked it off. And Walter was there giving advice into, how good Tom was. He's going to do the job. But Walter was there all the time to make sure this car would happen. So eventually we built the car, and we weren't quite through all the hurdles. We built this one, And we started to build a number of prototypes. It was a very exciting moment, as you can imagine. It was a wonderful time. And Walter said, and this was about 3 months, this was about January '93. And Walter came in and said, we're going to Geneva Motor Show. I said, that's in March. He said, yeah, we'll get one of the first cars and we'll but you haven't got full approval from Ford yet, have you? Don't you worry about that. So I didn't. I didn't talk to it either, actually. And we turned up at Geneva with this car. It wasn't actually signed off. He was shrewd, bloody shrewd. But of course, this car got so much attention, and so, in fact, he got orders. He got orders written out, and after that, the rest is history. He went back to Detroit. He got the papers signed, and off we went in production with the Aston Martin DB7. But at that point, he said to me, we're going to call it DB7. He spoke to David Brown. He said, can we use your name? And the DB let us, and he gave it his blessing, and so the car became DB7. When I heard that, I thought, wow, that really is something, DB7. The wee boy from Dumfries has designed an Aston Martin DB7. That was a big moment for me, probably one of the biggest. Just some pictures of the cars. Another was the number 2 car, that's in the dark red. And the rear quarter, of course, is one of the nicest parts of the car, with the shape and the voluptuousness of it, and the gentility. And all I wanted out of this car was a simple gentility out of it, with elegance, and it had to be handsome as well as beautiful. And I wanted to be timeless, as Aston should be. You know, every Aston should be timeless. You should be able to look at an Aston in 20 years' time and think, yes, it's of an era, but it's still a beautiful car. And I sort of think this is passing the test of time reasonably well, even with its massive tail lamps. And by the way, the mirrors are from the Citroen CX. Mirrors that every small car manufacturer used almost throughout the world, because they were lovely mirrors. They fitted the side of the door, they required no extra work, and they were the choice of all the kit cars around the world as well, unfortunately. But we decided to use them because they were handsome mirrors, they worked well, and they were legally compliant, which is always a big deal with these things. The interior evolved. The XJS seats were taken, redesigned. The frame was the same. There's no point redesigning the frame. And I can't remember the story behind the wheel. I think we did do our own wheel, but I had to get it homologated. It was very expensive, but basically the carcass of it was still the Jaguar carcass. Now back to the chassis before we get too far away from the XJS. When we were developing the car, 2 fundamental things happened. We had a V12 in it, which is quite a low engine, and then Walter came in one day and he told Tom it had to be a 6-cylinder. And he decided at this point it was going to be a DB7, and therefore it had to be a straight 6. That was it, end of story. Well, Tom wasn't too happy. You could clearly see his V12 disappearing off into the background. But so Tom said, well, I want you to put the 6-cylinder, here are the measurements. We took the clay model, and the 6 was higher than the 12 by about 25, 30 millimeters. And I said, well, I'm going to lift the bonnet. And he wasn't happy. He really understood the sensitivity of style. Tom. That's one thing I'd say for him. And I said, well, I'll model it in, come back tomorrow, we'll have a look at it. And I was always reasonably compliant with Tom. He kind of had to be with him. So he came in and he looked at this and he said, do you like it? And I said, do you like it? Because he didn't like it. And he wanted to hear from me he wasn't any good. So he got quite abrupt about it. I said, no, I don't like it, Tom. Right, come with me. And he dragged me to the engineering department, and he got Pete Dodd, who sadly is no longer with us, chief engineer. And he said to Pete in front of all his team, this boy doesn't like the new bonnet. Which is the way Tom worked. He's just a good boy. And he said, so what do you want to do with it? And I said, I need to drop the engine at least 25, 30 millimeters. Well, the subframe was designed, engineered. You know, the engine was engineered. It was a Jag supercharged engine. We did a lot of stuff to the headwork on the cylinder head, but basically it was what it was. And Pete said, well, what do you want to do with it? And Tom said, well, redesign the bloody subframe. Make it fit. These are the exact words. So Tom went off. Pete took one look at me, and I won't tell you what he called me. But but it wasn't very complimentary. But within 3 weeks, we'd re-engineered the whole subframe of that car to take a 6-cylinder engine 30 millimeters lower to get under the bonnet of the car we started. I wish my people at Jaguar would do that. I really do. Unfortunately, we've got steering racks and God knows what underneath our bloody engines. Anyway, all right, stop swearing about it. And so the whole subframe was re-engineered, and in the process, re-engineered the subframe to be a better subframe than its donor. So the front end of the car was made better as a result of this. When we first produced the prototypes, I walked into the workshop and came off the ramp, and Pete that was there, and I said, Pete, the back end looks like it's sitting in the air, but it's too high. That'll settle. Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah, whatever. And so I came back the next day to take a drive around one of the early prototypes, and I thought I'll give it a bit of time. 2 days later, it's still sitting high. So I knew the game. I went to see Tom. I said, Tom, the car's sitting too high at the back. He came in and said, you're right, Pete, you subframe at the back as well. So we re-engineered the rear subframe, and we made it better from the XJS to settle the back of the car down at least another 35 to 40 millimeters. So underneath your DB7 is not an XJS really. The bits that join the bits maybe are, but the bits that the wheels hang on to are really quite unique in a way. And the car, when you drive it, really shows that up to its best. So we went to Geneva, and lo and behold, at Geneva, I bumped into my brother. Now, I've been at GEA for a while, but he actually ended up working to me there, but I went on to TWR, I worked with the Aston Martin, and unbeknownst to me, and we didn't know this, he was working with GEA, and Walter had instigated another project with GEA, he didn't tell me anything about this, with the GEA Design Studio, and my brother was designing a car, I called it the Mark II Jag, so he took it to good humour. But he was designing this Lagonda because he wanted to bring the Lagonda name back, and we built this. He built a gear, this Lagonda Vignale. I found out right before the Geneva show. So, and on the show stand where we showed the DB7, which in itself for me was an enormous occasion. I was overwhelmed. I just thought, please don't let me have to speak. Please, please, please. Because I couldn't speak publicly in these days. I mean, some people say I still can't, but I really could not speak publicly. And I was just praying that they'd ask me to stand up and say a few words, which fortunately they didn't. I mean, talking to a journalist for the first time was terrifying enough. I'll tell you, it really was. But it was a big occasion. But what was really good for me is up in the gear stand, the hall upstairs, only within eyes distance, was this Lagonda Vignale my brother designed. And there was a model of it behind my car, and I got a lovely picture of myself and my brother with a DB7 and the model of Vignale behind it, which of course we framed and gave to my mother, and Autocar took that. Unfortunately, I can't find a copy. It's somewhere in my archives, which I'll have to dig out again. So that was a great momentous moment for me, one of the best days of my life, and little did I know it then, but it was a day that changed my life forever in so many ways, so many ways. So the Aston Martin DB7, I call it my happy car. I always say to journalists, you can tell whether the car is built out of angst, politics, or happiness. And this car was probably built during the best years of my life, working at TWR, and the friends I had there. I had wonderful experiences, and I think it really showed the way the car came out. So that was really the way they could be evolved. I'm sure there's a million other things I should have told you, but we'll get on with the story. We went back then and we created the convertible. I have to tell you, it's easier to do the convertible first and do a coupe afterwards, which I found that since, but to do a coupe after convertible without really much forethought was very, very hard indeed, in both engineering terms and aesthetically as well. But we managed to create what I think is quite a handsome convertible. I never think convertibles are quite as good looking as a coupe is in any car. And it beats me why E-Type Roadsters cost more than the coupes, but I don't know, that's the way it is. And so we evolved the car off the DB7, and the unfortunate thing is we had to carry over a lot of the makings of the XJ hood mechanism, The mechanism's all new, by the way, but the principles of it and the joints and everything are directly of the XGS, the Jaguar system, which I think was Edsher was making them. They were amongst the best good builders in the world. We still use them, and so it's a very, very good system. However, this does bring to light a couple of things which frustrated me in the car, and that was some of the detailing at this point is not up to the sort of par that I would like. Some of the rubber mouldings around the windows and some of the door seal mouldings in the early cars were actually far from being what they should have been. We put, I think, a bill of £100,000 into the mouldings of the door rubbers, and they were not particularly good for the first 6 months of production. And they clearly weren't suitable for the car, they didn't work. But this was what the penny pinching was all about. We got to the point where we really had spent the money and we had to go into the finite detail of such boring things like door rubbers and not pay the money for it. And I really wish we had, but then ultimately we did pay the money. So we went from that to £1.5 million investment, which Ford managed to put in. The other unfortunate thing to Tom was Ford suddenly took an interest in this car. And not, of course, least of all, because Jack Nasser was now involved. And Jack Nasser instigated the Vignali as well, and he was very close to Walter. And Jack really took a huge interest. Being Australian, he understood what an Aston Martin was, and knew it wasn't an Aston Martin. He was really very annoyed, actually. We tried to explain to his friends in Dearborn that an Aston Martin was a brand worth saving. And he convinced them. Much annoyance to Tom, he convinced Ford that we should hold on to Aston and continue. And here's an irony: the CFO that used to call it the Aston Martin, I can't remember his name, quite a well-known guy, bought one with his own money. He bought a DB7. I hope he bought an early one. So there were lots of thoughts with the car, but you have to remember that we did this car for £30 million. Now, okay, 30 million is a lot of money to any of us, I'm sure. But to build a car for 30 million is unheard of even back in 1993. Yeah, I can't do a facelift now, just cosmetically, for less than probably 25 to 30 million, if I'm lucky. That doesn't include any engine, any electronics. We're currently doing a facelift at the moment. It's well over 50 million, easily. So to build a car for 30 million in book, it was just nothing short of miraculous. And Ford fundamentally found it incredible. But it wasn't without its issues, which eventually resolved through time.